Take a good long last look at this website because it may be the last time you ever see it. Pump.fun seems like it is on its way out. We have a whole bunch of X accounts that recently just got nuked or suspended. And we have the founder of Pump.fun, Alon, I guess the little brother of Bram Cohen. I'm just kidding. It's not. But Alon Cohen got picked up in New York, likely to be prosecuted. This may be the end of the Pump.fun era until somebody else makes a clone or does this again. Lucas, you brought this to my attention. It looks like it's going to be prosecuted by our friends in New York City who have been, I think, prosecuting a whole bunch of other financial stuff. I think that it's the same district that's going to be looking or presiding over Tornado Cash and what happened with Samurai Wallet. What do we got here?
Well, I think by that you mean SDNY, the Southern District of New York. I thought I saw yesterday a copy of a statement by SDNY, but haven't had a chance to confirm that this morning. It would make sense. I believe Wall Street is in SDNY's district. And they often prosecute financial crimes along with it.
Now help me understand this. The hierarchy of all this. Does the Southern District of New York are they directly presided over by the Trump DOJ, or are they going to be operating independently? Because the Trump administration is pretty pro crypto, but are these guys just running whatever way they want and don't really have to answer to those guys?
Well, good question. They are part of the Department of Justice, but they are the if you're talking, I mean, the Trump DOJ. If we just think about a short history of Donald Trump and the Department of Justice, we know that that they work for the president may not be apparent to all the members of the Department of Justice. So I think they operate fairly autonomously. They have a I mean all these, there are several federal districts throughout the United States, but SDNY is in New York City. So, and I think there might be 4 districts. I know there also the Eastern District of New York, so the EDNY, also in New York City. But what questions? It is part of the Department of Justice. I don't know how. To your question about Trump being pro crypto. Yeah, that was what took me a little bit by surprise with this crackdown on Pump.fun. We've seen Paul Atkins, the new SEC commissioner, sort of working with crypto. We've seen the crypto roundtables, one that Gene sat on. They put the fries in the bag. He was a great representative of crypto, blockchain, and Chia. But there can still be crime in, or there can still be things that are against the law. I don't know. Crime will be decided by a jury of their peers. But things for prosecutors to be concerned about. And Pump.fun, we know, has been a casino over on Solana of meme coins. So it will be interesting to see what the charges are. Oh, yes, it is the SDNY.
No, hold on. This is something else that I found. So as I was just trying to pull up to see if the SDNY had published anything, it looks like there was a class action lawsuit brought against Pump.fun. This one actually flew under my radar. I didn't even hear about this one. So maybe this is what put Pump.fun on the SDNY's, docket, whatever. They started to look into it a little bit more, and they said, well, I guess if this is what's going on here, time to grab that guy.
I saw a screen cap that said the SEC was going after any accounts or wallets, IP addresses tied to wallets that had withdrawn coins before a bonding curve was met on Pump.fun. But when I looked at the SEC Twitter feed, that it wasn't there. So that may have been AI generated. It may have been taken down. It may have been from an account that I wasn't looking at. I looked at the SEC Gov account. So I'm not sure what the charges are against the founder of Pump.fun. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on here. So, but you know, it's I'm going back to the SEC and what their clarity is with crypto. It's hard to have clarity with crypto when there's so many aspects of it. There's so many different uses for it. I don't know who goes to Pump.fun expecting less than you know, a meme generation, you know, a gambling site, quick money. It'll be interesting for to see what the fight is over what expectations are and who's actually in the wrong with Pump.fun.
Well, look at what we've got here. We've got the SDNY presiding over 3 landmark cases related to crypto. So we've got Tornado Cash, the mixer that was on Ethereum. We've got Samurai Wallet, which was providing privacy in the whole Bitcoin world. I will have to dig into the details and try to describe this. We've covered Samurai Wallet and some of the privacy aspects that can be brought into Bitcoin here before, but you know, if we really want to dig into that one deeply, we probably have to devote an entire episode to that. But the fact that you got Tornado Cash, which was the mixer, you got Samurai Wallet, which was another privacy type thing, and now we have Pump.fun. I mean, these guys are pretty much going to be issuing the rulings for almost everything that is really important and interesting in crypto. I guess the only other thing that might be there would be self-custody. So if a self-custody thing gets brought before the SDNY, then they'll have everything that's important in crypto kind of at their fingertips and getting a chance to rule on this one. As far as Pump.fun goes, I will be interesting to see what the specific charges are. With respect to the class action lawsuit that was brought before the court, that may give us a bit of information about what the complaints were. It looks like it's just complaints that it's an unregistered security and that you know, there was bad actors that were helping to make this thing a Ponzi scheme. So must be insider information flowing to specific individuals, likely that is part of this class action lawsuit.
You know, there's a couple of other things here I find interesting. One, if we wonder why SDNY has all of these cases against crypto, it goes to their self-appointed authority, which is somewhat akin to the federal government's one of the I don't know, lines of logic that they assert their authority with regards to things that are going on in the United States, and they say, well, anything that, and around the world, anything that uses a dollar because they have control of it, well, they must have authority over it. And SDNY likewise says, well, if money is flowing through New York City, then we automatically have control over that. Now, I do believe this Alon Cohen lived in New York City, but you could see if one specific jurisdiction was cracking down on crypto harder than others, then you could see the operations moving outside of their jurisdiction in some way. And I know there's extradition. Think of Sam Bankman-Fried and CZ, whose bodies were taken out from outside the country. And thrown into prison in the United States. But I think as we see crypto and various other forms of money gaining in prominence against the dollar, then that assumption of authority is going to be diminished for the likes of the SDNY. I think they might be somewhat aware of that, and that might be part of their hardened stance against crypto. So they want to. I would imagine they'd like to see the traditional flows of money through dollars and Wall Street and physical banks remain in our world. The other there was something I guess the other thing somebody asked me recently. Go ahead, Grant. Go ahead. Before I get to my other point.
Well, I was just thinking about these X accounts getting suspended. For Elon Musk being involved here, did they get some kind of a legal notice that forced this? I thought Elon said he was going to stop suspending accounts like this and taking these down. This must be related to some kind of a court order that was issued by the SDNY.
I don't know that we can assume that X may have taken it down for something less than a court order. I've seen a lot of accounts get suspended for less than a court order. That might be a lot of complaints made against the account. Who knows? X may be making the claim that things were done against their user agreement. They may be erring on the side of caution, but until we see a court order that the account was suspended, I don't know that we should assume that occurred. What I was going to my second point, unless you have more on that. Somebody asked me recently before this occurred to explain meme coins to them. And this was while I was sitting down to lunch, and somebody who knows me, and I can't imagine why they would ask me this, but asked how I thought about meme coins. And sort of off the cuff, I said they're like spam email. And if we begin to get away from these older notions of I don't know, just state-backed currencies or what money is, to me, meme coins are much like hashtags or maybe not spam emails. Maybe hashtags is a better explanation of them. And imagine if Twitter had started and you only had you could make a limited amount of hashtags, because they would gain in value if you did that. And then you can then you have all of these games that can be played with what the perceived value of something is.
I think you're assuming that there's some kind of fair distribution and fair game that's played here. When you make a meme coin, somebody's in control of the lion's share of those coins. And so as you sucker people in, then you get to dump on the chain and rug it. That's the whole point of the meme coin. So, I mean, maybe there's some way you could make this super fair and make it so that it's like an attention economy sort of a thing, and that there's a way to be smart early and have it be a meritocracy. But that's not the way it works, because you have somebody who's issuing it, somebody who's in control of the majority of the tokens. Usually that's 90 to 99% reside in one. And so the people that are getting in and getting out are usually doing so on insider information. And it's the people that know that and do it that way that are making the lion's share of the money.
Well, great points. And we would think that people would want to see fair distribution. I don't know that that's the case. I think that people see an idea and they want to jump on into it, no matter what that distribution is. I think also that the federal government is going to have, or any level of government is going to have problems if they make rules regarding what that distribution is. What they can do is be enforcing disclosure, but because it's blockchain, the disclosure is implicit. So this is going to be interesting to see what the charges are, what the arguments that are making, and what the findings are with because again, the disclosure is implicit. It's if it's on blockchain and everything is public, then I mean, you make a point about insider information too, but
Well, this class action lawsuit against Pump.fun says that Pump.fun was running unregistered securities. If this is what they're going to take on about actually making a declaration about this and how this is supposed to work, I think this would be one of the first times that this has been taken on in recent years, even after everything that's been said about what constitutes a security, whether you're sufficiently decentralized, all this kind of stuff that came up in the Tron case. Whether any of that will come into play here, it'd be interesting to see if that is the precedent that they lean on.
There's the Howey test for how the SEC determines what a security is, but
wait, I said Tron, I meant to say Ripple. I was thinking about Ripple and I said Tron because you got thinking about Justin Sun being with what's it called, with Trump recently.
Yes, with Trump's meme coin company.
Yeah, so it's Ripple that I was trying to say, to see if any of what happened with Ripple plays into what goes on with Pump.fun, because it seems like there's precedent under what happened with Ripple that would weigh in on whatever's going to go on with Pump.fun here.
Well, so when I think about what would make more sense going forward in the future, because again, we have the Howey test. We have long had this expectation that the SEC could look at things and declare what they think is a security, what they think is under their regulation is not. I think that should be determined by who registers with them. And again, like they can enforce expectations of of fraud if people are claiming that they are registered with the SEC and that this is an SEC monitored security. But this whole notion that a government office gets to go out and evaluate what meets the criteria for their regulation and what does not, I think it presents a problem. And as we have more diversity in products and also more people who are engaging this from all around the world, and people who are using it within the United States, whether the creator be in some foreign country or in New York City or in the house next door to them, we've sort of opened the door for communication and for commerce here. So some of the I don't know, barriers to getting into the game that existed for traditional financiers are melting away, and the SEC is going to have to figure out how to deal with that. So,
and this is really saying that, at least this class action lawsuit is saying it's an unregistered security. So as far as who comes in and registered, if the platform Pump.fun would have, I don't know, automated that registration process and allowed for something like that, maybe that there is a way forward to do something like that. Maybe we'll get some clarity around these things if the SDNY decides to weigh in on it in this fashion. Also, Chia has been trying to get clarity from the SEC. I mean, they've spent 3 years, I think, now working on trying to get clarity on this. And we've definitely seen where Gene is there talking to them regularly about Bermuda. And we've heard that there's been responses to their letters. We're all still waiting to see exactly what Chia has gotten sorted out with them. But, ostensibly, Gene's been working on this tirelessly for a long time to try and get clarity on this. And he felt at least emboldened enough that they could sell the pre-farm under whatever he's learned and what's come out. So, as far as an L1, we maybe have some clarity around what's a security and what's not, but Pump.fun being tokens on some other chain being issued like meme coins, maybe there is no sufficiently decentralized here, because You've got the centralized issuing authority, a single entity who is in control of most of it. They have the ability to dump on it. This claims of Ponzi schemes. These seem to be the critical points that it would weigh on.
I think many members of the Chia community expected the SEC to put an end to entire blockchains, not just Tron, but to blockchains like Solana and Ethereum, and were probably surprised at the splitting of hairs that the SEC the hairs the SEC began to split, or at least the Department of Justice began to split, rather than do so. Now, as you bring up this class action lawsuit, I think how interesting would it be if a bunch of holders of a meme coin turn around and filed a class action lawsuit against the SEC and said, we don't care, we're protected in our ability to enter into contracts. We were aware of all the things in which you are presuming to argue for on our behalf. How dare you? Interfere with our fund? I mean, maybe I'm way out on a limb here, but I would expect that to happen at some point. I would at least know that sentiment exists through a broad swath of crypto. There are people who, there's this narrative of becoming your own bank, but there's also equally, if not stronger, this narrative of owning your own money and getting out of government control.
What is the mechanism there? Has that ever been done? You're saying, could somebody do something like that, as if that was possible? I mean, can you sue a court? Can you say, SDNY, we don't want you to do this, we want a ruling in the other direction?
Well, I don't know that you can sue a court, but you could sue the Securities Exchange Commission. You might be able to sue the directors. I'm not sure. But you can at least file a lawsuit, and you can build a narrative. And I think a group of unified voices that said to the SEC, which ostensibly is what's been happening with the pushback against Gary Gensler, the pushback by crypto, that said, hey, you were made to make the guardrails and to for the elite in society. And we were, and the rules that you made locked us out of entering into the financial games that were played by the elites of society for a very long time. And we're not interested in your interference or your presumption for declaring who wins, who loses, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. That should be on our shoulders. Part of the attraction of money, over barter, over trade, is the ability to play these games with it, engage in finance, and this notion that somebody gets to declare what the rules are with regards to finance is underpinned by the notion that the only money that can be in existence is that's made by the government.
I think the early applications or attempt to apply the rules to what was going on is a lot different than what's happening with meme coins. It's harder to make a case that a meme coin is a security. It's a lot easier to make a case that you've created some kind of a security when you have something like Ethereum, which set out to raise money to create a blockchain, sold tokens at a low price. They had the expectation that those tokens were going to go up. There was a whole host of issues that were happening related to the ICOs of, I guess, the era of something around 2017 to 2019, where there were a lot of blockchains that were raising money. There were tokens that were raising money. And they were doing all of this with the expectation that these projects, or whatever it was that was being sold, was somehow going to be a type of investment. It's so hard to say that what's going on with the meme coins is anything even close to that, because I don't think anybody is coming into this with any expectation that there's going to be a long-term project, that there's going to be any kind of investment. It's mostly just a JPEG, these pump and dump bonding curves, whatever, and then you're in and out. I don't think any of the users on Pump.fun are expecting these to be long-term projects or any kind of common interest in investment. So I think that this is where we need to see real clarity from the courts. If they're going to weigh in on it, they've got to start to refine the definition of these things in such a way that these are distinct, and that if people want to engage in this type of behavior, which they clearly do. I mean, Pump.fun is popular. Solana is popular because you're able to do this kind of stuff on a low fee chain where it's nobody cares about decentralization, nobody cares about transparency. It's not a long-term hold. It's just a casino. It's a betting area, and clearly humanity wants to engage in these types of activities. So the SEC should endeavor to define these rules in such a way that it allows for the distinction here to be much different than what happened with Ethereum. And I don't even think Ethereum was prosecuted correctly.
I mean, I'm not against the SEC establishing a standard and saying, if companies or people who are making coins want to create something to meet this standard, we will review the application or the information that we require, and we will give it our seal of, our seal of approval. But
well, hold on. They don't give approvals, but they say that you followed the rules or you didn't follow the rules according to what you're presenting them. And I think, given how fast this moves, this process would have to be automated. It would have to be something about, and especially since the blockchain is transparent, we do have that level, that there could be some sort of auditability, or even a mechanism where if you use certain types of templates, that you would automatically have the ability to move forward. I think that would be the kind of thing we'd need to see. I don't think this idea that you would go through an application process with the SEC, that's not going to work for meme coins, because it's just too fast. It's too in and out, and these things aren't funded in that way. If you were to go through a process like that, it would probably mean that you had at least raised some money, and then you probably have tripped the line into security. So the mechanisms would need to be updated for the modern world, for sure.
Well, what I'm saying is they can give approval, or they can certify something, but I don't know that they can deny it. And this is where we come to the conversation about the decentralization of blockchain. What's that about? That's about their inability to enforce something. And this is going to be something that the government begins to understand more as these politicians talk about sanctions. And we've heard Donald Trump say, "Oh, if you use the BRICS payment network, then I'm going to sanction you." Well, communication can be private, and a contract isn't something that's written down. It's an agreement that exists between two parties. And I can look somebody in the eyes and nod and have an unspoken agreement that exists between us. It doesn't have to be written down. And in much the same way, it's going to be hard to pin down agreements or contracts that are made between parties. And so the SEC, if the government were wise, they would be getting ahead of this and getting away from this notion of saying, well, we not only have the ability to give our imprimatur to agreements that meet our expectations of fairness and disclosure, but we're also going to be in the business of shutting those down that we think don't. That's where I think we're going to see a change in the future, and have already begun to see it. Now, you brought up IPOs and ICOs earlier, in initial coin offerings. Those come around because the SEC was not willing to do IPOs, initial public offerings, in their traditional way, for companies for which they had a for which they did not approve of the business that the company was going to be engaging in, the creation of a blockchain. And
well, it was viewed as an alternative mechanism. Like it's this whole let's disrupt. This is a very Silicon Valley, tech boom sort of thing to do. When you think you have the new technology, you think you've got the right thing, sometimes you just do it, and the consequences be damned. We've seen this repeatedly. We've talked about this extensively with the sharing economy, where you've got people renting out their houses without licenses or the licensure that's required, violating zoning laws and whatever. You've got companies running unlicensed taxi services and just flying in the face of it. During the ICO craze, it was just like, well, we could go through this whole IPO process, but we've got something that's faster and better. We can just do it with tokens, and because it's all transparent, this should be fine. And it has been found to be not fine. And as far as this goes, I think it's one case where we've seen the courts stop a technological advance, and we really don't have this sort of a thing occurring. It's something I think Chia wants to bring back. It's something they've talked about, making somehow possible with verifiable credentials. I don't know if you remember that whole era when that was first coming out, that they spoke extensively about how companies could potentially go public using some of these mechanisms, and that it would probably pass muster at the SEC. So I viewed that whole era as one of those, hey, tech bros are just going to break the law. But I think that kind of went away pretty fast, and you don't really hear anybody doing ICOs these days, because it's pretty clear that if you do that, you're going to be in significant trouble.
Well, I think they'd still be doing it if there were hard lines in the SEC about opening up to crypto and blockchain companies, and that has all changed in the wake of the Torres Ripple SEC decision. Now, I could be wrong about this, but I think it's Steven Nareoff who came up with the ICO concept in something like 2013, 2014. It was before Ethereum. But he is a securities exchange lawyer, or a lawyer who specializes in giving advice to companies who are working with the SEC. And I believe I've heard him speak about the door being closed with regards to those blockchain companies, and so they embarked on the ICO model that was essentially a copy of the IPO model, but was an internal investment scheme rather than going through the, look at here, 2013. I don't know if it mentions Nareoff.
Well, and then it's just hot on the heels that Ethereum raised in 2014.
Oh yeah, Mastercoin. That's what it was. Mastercoin. So, but anyway, I point that out because yes, we have seen, we do not see as many ICOs now, but I wonder how the SEC once it admits that it can't control blockchains that reach a certain threshold of decentralization, then how is it going to quash that concept emerging on something that's sufficiently decentralized? I don't think they can. So they need to let go of this notion that they get to say no. They merely get to say thumbs up, and here's a list of the things that we've given thumbs up to.
Yeah, and this thumbs up, again, I'm going to just make sure that we're clear on this, that they're not saying everything is okay as far as this being a good investment. They're just saying that the rules were followed. I think the problem with these ICOs is we don't have clear rules, and the Howey test is inadequate to deal with blockchains. I've personally had to go through this and had to try to make these determinations on a variety of projects. And the rules are complicated. The checklist is daunting, and fighting the SEC is not something that most companies or projects want to engage in. So I think it's the rare project indeed that would go through the lengths that something like CNI has gone through to try to get this kind of approval. And if you look at how long it's taken them to wade through this, it's just not feasible for most projects to do it. So we're left without clarity on this. And the fact that the SDNY is going to do something about the meme coins on Pump.fun, I think it's going to come down to the operators of the centralized portion of Pump.fun, the taking of money for the registering of the ticker symbols. I think all of that kind of stuff is what's going to come into play here, and that they're somehow operating an unregulated and unregistered marketplace that for securities. If I had to guess, this is what it's going to boil down to, is the fact that they were doing the ticker symbols and a bunch of the other stuff related to the registration of these things, and that they were taking on authority that they don't have.
So when I think about the SEC, and I don't mean to impugn their honor, but I often think of them as a country club. I believe the SEC comes around in the wake of the Great Depression, and in the reformation under FDR of the American economy. So you might check on that. I think it's somewhere in the early 40s that it comes into being, maybe the late 30s. Sorry, but it brings to mind something deeper in the history of banking in the United States, and that goes to, we talk about these rules and what are fair. And if we rewind to before the existence of the Federal Reserve that was created by J.P. Morgan and other interested parties, and we go back to a time whenever John D. Rockefeller had a massive empire of corporations and banks in the United States, and J.P. Morgan also had an empire of banks, and they worked against each other. So you were either in one system, you were in Rockefeller's system, or you were in Morgan's system, and they didn't get along, and they had their own rules, because we also talk about money all the time as if money's only come from banks. Money's only come from governments, but governments give out the rules for banks, and in some way monies are created whenever trust exists between parties. And so if you have a banking system, especially a private banking system, and they have their own rules and their own expectations of trust, then you have different monetary systems. So how did they come together is an interesting story to go back to. And they come together at the behest of the Mormon Church, none less than the Mormon Church. And in a time whenever John D. Rockefeller had something like $150 million in the United States, and J.P. Morgan had $20 million. I think those are their personal fortunes. I'm not sure about how large their banking industries, but just to give you an idea of their magnitudes, I believe the Mormon Church had something like $30 million, and they had accrued that in their own treasury in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was the treasurer of the Mormon Church that went to John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan and said, he said, Mormons are not going to work with either of you with our business dealings unless we come to an agreement on what rules are fair and what expectations for interest rates and financial windows are acceptable, and what the reporting practices for all of that should be. And that is where we got our standard accounting principles that nobody questions where they come from today. So I bring that up to just to say, I think that we are moving back to a world of many systems of exchange, many private monies. And so for us to have an expectation that everyone who engages in contract and commerce with those private monies have the same standards or principles is going to be a frustrating expectation.
Well, I don't know what else I've got to say about this. We'll keep an eye on it. If there's new developments, we'll kind of look back into it. But SDNY has several cases that are going to be very interesting. So we'll at least have to follow up on kind of rounding up all three of these, and maybe 4 or 5 if I really thought hard about what's in front of them. It seems like we're going to get a whole bunch of clarity about at least what the SDNY thinks with respect to these crypto related matters, and whether any of it makes its way higher in the chain. Maybe we'll even see the Supreme Court weighing in on it. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see this come up in the Trump administration.
That would be interesting, but yeah, I'd love to hear the oral arguments if it went to the Supreme Court. If it's merely in the SDNY or in the DOJ level, we can expect that that their rules will change from administration to administration. So anyway, fun conversation. Good luck to Pump.fun, and that's all I got for today.
All right, we'll see you next time on FOMO.